為碼平得掉，直限高達150蚊。
Today we're going to be ranking every Porsche inside of Driving Empire, but before we do that, make sure to subscribe and drop a like in this video. Without further ado, let's get right into it. Now, Driving Empire has lots of Porsches, but we're going to be ranking them on this tier list I made, the Driving Empire Porsche tier list maker here. I'll try to remember to put it in the description or comments below for you all to do if you want. But let's see, we're going to start ranking them. We got the categories great, good, mid, bad, trash. Obviously, you want your car to be in great. Trash, you do not want your car to be in. We're just ranking the Porsche model that they have in the game. Now, if you all agree with my rankings, you can comment below. If you disagree, you can also comment that below as well. And we'll see basically what I rank these. So we are starting off with this Porsche 718 Cayman Boxster S. Okay, ooh. This one, dude, we're gonna hop in Driving Empire. I'm not gonna lie. The Porsche Cayman Boxster S. Oh my goodness. This might be one of the lamest Porsches of all time. I'm not even gonna lie to you all. Like, you know, don't get me wrong, Porsches are all cool, you know, they're Porsches, but at the end of the day, comparing them to other Porsches, you know, I'm not a huge fan of this design. I feel like it looks very weak, very girly, I guess, the design. I don't love the design. It just doesn't look very aggressive, like a very manly car. It's just kind of a little bit tame, a little bit weak. The front end, yeah, this is kind of weak. The side, pretty weak. The rear, pretty weak. Comparing it to another Porsche convertible, I mean, we could compare it to this convertible. This one's more aggressive all around, as you can see. So obviously I know it's not a Porsche 911, but the Boxster, it just isn't my favorite Porsche. So because of that, ooh, I think honestly we're gonna have to give this one, I'm putting it in trash out of Porsches. I would say that this Porsche is trash. I do not like it at all. I'm not even gonna lie to you. The Porsche 718 Cayman GT4. Okay, now this one I do like. Now it's the same type of car, but they fixed it. They made it aggressive. You know, they've added this front aero thing here. They've added all these holes and stuff. Obviously, for all the, you know, racing purposes of the car, the spoiler, but all of it together obviously makes the car, you know, perform better, but also look much better. I feel like it looks much more aggressive. I'm still not a huge fan of the base design, but with all the aggressive elements added, it makes it better, and I really like the wheels on this one. So the GT4 RS, it's not my favorite, but it's definitely better. I'll say that. It's definitely better. So I'm going to put this one, where should I put it? You know, I don't want to trigger people by putting it in just mid, but on the category of Porsches, I think we will put this one in good. This is actually a good one. I think this one's pretty good. Now, next up, we have the Porsche 911 Turbo 50 Years Heritage Design. Okay, this one, the 50 Years Heritage. Let's see where we can find this. So, the 50 Years Heritage Special Edition in game. Oh, I actually quite like this one. It's got a nice flat interior design. You know, you either love that or hate it. I think it adds character to the car. I like the livery on this one. The stock wheels, I didn't love, so I put on these aftermarket. But in this green with the white, I actually really like this one. I think we're going to put this Porsche in good. I'm not going to lie. I don't know if it's as cool as the GT4 RS, though, so we'll just put it in good right below it. Next up, the Porsche 911 Speedster. Now, the 911 Speedster, don't get me wrong, you know, this car is a special car in game. It's cool. It's more aggressive than the other convertible Porsche, but I'm just not a fan of convertible Porsches with the soft top. I feel like the soft top really ruins the design of the Porsche, especially from this angle. It looks really whack. I don't like how it's just a solid color here instead of some, you know, I don't know what they could have put there, but something else besides that. It just looks wrong. It doesn't suit this Porsche well. I mean, with the top down, it looks a little bit better, but I don't know. I feel like this one, it's just something's missing from it. I don't love this Porsche. I'm not gonna lie. I like the wheel design though on it. I'll give it that. But I just don't love the overall design of this Porsche. So I don't know. What are we gonna rank it? I think I might put this one in bad. You know, that might be controversial. Either bad or mid. I mean, I don't like convertible. The convertible ruins it, in my opinion. This is my opinion, so I'm putting it in bad. I think the convertible top ruins it. Next up, the 911 GT3 RS, the 997.2 generation. Okay, we gotta find that one. I think that's this one. Okay, so this one, I actually have a weird spec on it right now. Let's make it a better spec so we can give it an honest opinion. Personally, I would have this car in this lava orange color with the secondary. I think we would black out this trim, honestly, so let's just go and black it all out. The calipers, I would also probably get done in lava orange, and then the wheels, I would get to match the blacked out, obviously, trim pieces, or not trim, the little secondary color.
There is about 116 universally recognized mathematical symbols, and I'm going to explain every one of them. Addition. 1, 2 plus 1, 2 equals 1, 2, 3, 4. Boom. Subtraction. If 2 plus 2 is 4, then 4 minus 2 equals 2. It's addition just backwards. Multiplication. If I have a 3 by 3 grid of cells, then I have 9 cells, because 3 times 3 equals 9. Division. If Johnny has 6 apples and 2 friends, how many apples does each friend get? 3, because 6 divided by 2 is 3. But you struggle with division because you have no friends and you can't divide by 0. Plus minus. We didn't know whether to put a plus or a minus here, so we used both. 2 plus minus 1 is 1 or 3. Minus plus. A plus minus B minus plus C equals A plus B minus C. Or A minus B plus C. These signs remain opposites. Equal. If A equals B means A is the same as B, then A not equals B means A is not the same as B. But we can get more specific than that. We can write A is greater than B or A is less than B, and we can even put a little line here to indicate that A is greater than or equal to B. Percent literally just means the exact same thing as divide by 100. So if you're dealing with a difficult percentage problem, then try moving the percentage sign around, because it doesn't actually matter where the percent sign goes, and you can easily find the answer. Degrees. 360 degrees is 1 full turn, so 1 degree is a teeny tiny turn. But do you know what's even smaller than 1 degree? An arcsecond, which is 1 degrees divided by 3,600. Powers. The nth power of A is just A times A times A times A n times. And the nth root of A is the inverse of this, so the nth root of the nth power of A is just A. Again, same thing, just backwards.
This property over here in the UK makes me a lot more money every month compared to properties I've bought in other countries. So if you're interested to know why I love investing in the UK versus countries like Singapore, Australia, or any other country in the world, make sure you watch this video.
Properties in Singapore are so expensive. Even HDBs are more than $1 million. What's the point of buying a condo here when the rent can't even cover its mortgage? I think most smart investors come to that conclusion and start to look at overseas instead. However, where do you start? And which country is better? Some people might think maybe nearer is better, like Malaysia, or perhaps Australia or New Zealand. Or should you look at emerging markets in Asia, like Thailand or Vietnam, that are not so expensive yet? Or should it be somewhere where your kids can go to university in, the US or the UK? The answer is actually quite straightforward. You need to ask yourself, what is your strategy?
Again, same thing, just backwards. Pi. Dr. Edward J. Goodwin, an amateur mathematician from Indiana, claimed to have discovered a method for squaring a circle, a famous problem that had already been proven unsolvable in 1882. Despite this, Goodwin was convinced of his own work and sought official recognition for his discoveries. But rather than publishing a mathematical journal like the rest of us, he took a different approach. He tried to make it state law. In 1897, House Bill number 246 was brought to the Indiana General Assembly. The bill effectively claimed to fix the value of pi. The ratio of the diameter and the circumference is as 5/4 to 4, which implies that pi is 3.2. Amazingly, the Indiana House of Representatives unanimously passed the bill on February 5, 1897, most likely because they saw it as a way to support Indiana's reputation in education and science. The bill was then sent to Indiana Senate for final approval. By sheer luck, Professor Clarence Waldo was visiting the Indiana legislature on unrelated business, and when he heard about the bill, he was horrified and immediately stepped in. He had to explain to the House that 1, the bill is mathematically incorrect, 2, it would make Indiana the laughingstock of the world, and 3, mathematical constants like pi can't be legislated. Or in other words, just because Indiana says pi is 3.2 doesn't mean pi is 3.2. Eventually, Indiana had to accept the fact that pi was not 3.2. But it makes you think, what if they did it? Delta typically means difference. For example, the gradient of a straight line is the difference between the two y coordinates over the difference between the two x coordinates, or delta y over delta x. Proportional. If y is proportional to x, then y equals kx, where k is a constant. Sometimes you might see a proportional sign flipped to indicate that y is inversely proportional, or y equals k over x. Approximately equal. I actually already use this for my value of pi because no matter how many decimal places you add, you can never actually write down the exact value of pi. It will only ever be approximately equal. Perpendicular. 2 lines are perpendicular if they intersect at a right angle. Parallel. 2 lines are parallel if they're in the same plane and never intersect no matter how far they extend. Angle. Sometimes measured in degrees but can also be measured in radians, where a full turn is 2 pi. Similar. A is similar to B when A is the same shape but different in size. You can also put a line under it to make it similar or equal. Congruent. A is congruent to B if they have the same shape and size. The to arrow is used for a range of things from vectors to limits to mappings, but it generally always means to. The line symbol shows an infinite set of points extending in both directions without any endpoint width or thickness. Therefore, because the absolute value of a number is the difference between that number and 0 on a number line. The floor of a number is the value of that number rounded down to the nearest integer, and the ceiling is the value rounded up to the nearest integer. The factorial of n gives you the number of ways of arranging n elements, so the number of ways of arranging a deck of cards is 52 factorial, or 8 times 10 to the 67. For reference, the number of grains of sand on Earth is 7.5 times 10 to the 18. Sigma is typically used to talk about the sum of many terms. The initial index is defined below the sigma, and the final index is above, and the terms to be summed is on the right of the sigma. Also, sometimes sigma can be used to define the set of letters. Product works in the same way as sigma, only we're multiplying instead of adding. Contrary to popular belief, infinity actually isn't the biggest number. Because infinity isn't a number, infinity is a concept that means unboundedness. Aleph null is the smallest infinity, and omega is the biggest. Little d, like delta, represents the change or difference in something. But when we're dealing with curved lines, the only way to find the exact gradient is to make the change in x and the change in y infinitely small. We represent this using little d. Partial is almost the same as little d, but we use little d to find the derivative and partial to find the partial derivative, which calculates the rate of change with respect to one variable while keeping all the other variables constant in a function with multiple variables. Integral calculates the area under a curve by adding together all the thin slices which make up the area. It's an elongated version of the letter S, which stands for sum, and it's also the inverse of differentiation. Set theory. Curly braces define a set as a list of its elements. The most common sets are the natural numbers, the integers, the rational numbers, the real numbers, the complex numbers, and the prime numbers. And you can also say it's raining if and only if there is water coming out of the sky. 1 is an element of the set 1, 2, 3 because 1 appears in the set, but 4 is not an element of the set 1, 2, 3. A union B is all the elements in the set A or B, and A intersect B is all the elements in set A and B. A is a subset of B if all the elements in A are also in set B. You can also put a line under the subset sign to signify that it's subset or equal to. This gun symbol means not, and a backslash means the set difference, which means all the elements in A that's not in B, and it looks like this. This means and this means or, this means for all, and this means there exists. Curly P is used to denote the power set, and the power set of A is just a set of all possible subsets of A. So if A is 1, 2, then the power set of A is the empty set, the set of 1, the set of 2, and the set 1, 2. A colon is used to represent such that or given, and you can also use a vertical line. So for example, the power set of A is just the set of all S such that S is a subset or equal to A. The empty set is represented by the Danish O/ symbol, and omega is used in probability theory to represent the set of all possible outcomes. I is equal to the square root of -1, so I squared is -1, and I to the 4 is -1 times -1, which is just 1. The dot product of two vectors A and B, where A is 1, 2, -3, and B is 4, -5, 6, is the sum of the product of the adjacent values. So you just multiply the 1 by the 4, and then the 2 by the 5, and the -3 by the 6, which gives you 4 minus 10 minus 18, which is -24. If A is 1, 2, and B is AB, then the Cartesian product is the set of ordered pairs 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, so the Cartesian product of A and B is the set of all pairs of elements where the first is in A and the second is in B. If f and g are functions, then f circle g is the composite of the functions f and g, so you find g of x first, then you find f of all of that. The mean, represented by mu, is the average of a data set, which is found using this formula, or as I like to say, the sum over the count. The standard deviation, denoted by sigma, is how spread out the data is. So if you find the mean using this formula, then you find the standard deviation using this. Tau is just 2 pi, which some believe makes it easier to work with circles. So instead of finding the circumference using 2 pi r, you just use tau r, or instead of finding the area using pi r squared, you just use tau r squared over 2. Okay, maybe not that one, but Terrace Tower is pretty cool. The golden ratio is 1 plus root 5 over 2, or 1.61x. The Riemann zeta function equals the sum from 1 to infinity of 1 over n to the s, and it's also the product of 1 minus 1 over p to the s inverted for all prime numbers. So this is useful when working with prime numbers. Fold h is the set of all quaternions, and a quaternion is a number q which equals a plus bi plus cj plus bk, where I squared equals j squared equals k squared equals ijk equals minus 1. So ij equals k, jk equals I, and ki equals j. Got it? Fold M is the set of all matrices, and a matrix is just a grid of numbers. More on that later. If A is a square matrix and X is a non-zero vector, then the eigenvalue satisfies this equation. A sequence space is a set of sequences that satisfy specific conditions. For example, if L infinity is the space of all bounded sequences, then sequence X sub n equals minus 1 to the n belongs to L infinity because X sub n is bounded between minus 1 and 1. The Weierstrass elliptic is this formula here, and it's used in complex analysis, but it's not used in hippopotamus, so honestly it's not worth my time, and that's definitely not because I don't understand it. This funny symbol just means section. For example, see section 4.2 for proof. And if z equals a plus bi, then the conjugate of z equals a minus bi. Coproduct is the opposite of the Cartesian product. So if the Cartesian product joins the elements of a and b together, then the coproduct keeps them disjoint. Nabla is used to denote the gradient of a function as a vector, which points in the direction of steepest increase in that part of the function. So if f equals x plus 2y plus 3z, then nabla f equals 1, 2, 3. If a precedes b, then a is in some way of lower order than b, but it doesn't necessarily mean that a is less than b. For example, we can write the set 1 precedes the set 1, 2 because 1, 2 has more elements, but that doesn't necessarily mean that 1 is less than 1, 2. Instead of saying that from Peano's axioms we can prove 1 plus 1 is 2, we can just say that Peano's axioms entails 1 plus 1 is 2. So the statement gamma entails phi means that phi is provable from the set of assumptions gamma. Semantic entailment just means that phi is true in all models where the assumptions gamma hold. Aleph null is the smallest countable infinity, and it's equal to the size of the set of natural numbers. The size of the set of real numbers is 2 to the power of Aleph null. Beth null equals Aleph null, which is the size of the set of natural numbers. Beth 1 equals 2 to the power Beth null, which is the size of the set of real numbers. And Beth 2 equals 2 to the power Beth 1, which is the size of the power set of the real numbers. So in general, Beth n plus 1 equals 2 to the Beth n. If R is the table with columns employee ID, name, and department ID, and S is the table with columns department ID, department name, then R join S is the table with columns employee ID, name, department ID, and department name. The department IDs just get joined together into one table. So if A is this 2 by 2 matrix here, then the conjugate of A is the complex conjugate of each of the values in A. And A transpose is what happens when you take the rows of matrix A and turn them into columns. A dagger is what happens when you do both, and it doesn't matter which way around you do them. Double dagger is used as a custom operation, and it can mean anything, and diamond P is possibly P. If V is the vector 1, 2, and W is the vector 3, 4, 5, then to find the tensor product of the two vectors, you lay the first vector along the side and the second along the top, and then multiply the rows by the columns to find the cells in the resulting matrix. If A and B are matrices, then the Hadamard product of A and B is just the element-wise product of each element in the matrix. The symmetric difference of A and B is A subtract B union B subtract A, and it looks like this. The top symbol is used to mean always true. For example, P or not P is always true, and the bottom symbol means always false. For example, P and not P is always false. The gamma function is this function here, and it helps us to build a continuous function for the factorial of n. The chi symbol is used in Euler's characteristic, which is vertices minus edges plus faces, and it's equal to 2 for all three-dimensional polygons. Kappa stands for curvature, and it's found using this equation. The Fourier transform takes a function and breaks it down into the sum of sine and cosine waves of different frequencies. The Laplace transform takes a function of time and converts it into a function of a complex variable, making it easier to solve differential equations. A Hilbert space is like an extended version of 3D space, but it can have infinitely many dimensions and applies to functions, signals, and complex numbers. Here's a meme to explain how it works. Epsilon is used in the definition of limits. Think of it as a very small number which represents how close you want the function's output to get to a certain value. In topology, curly n denotes the neighborhood of a point P, which is a set containing all points close to P, and curly T represents a topology where a mug equals a donut. Curly M represents a manifold, which is a space that looks like regular Euclidean space locally but can have complex properties globally. In game theory, curly A represents the set of actions, decisions, or strategies available to a player. If A has eigenvalues lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda 3, and so on, then A equals P lambda inverse P, where P is the matrix of eigenvectors, and lambda is the diagonal matrix of eigenvalues. In complex analysis, psi denotes the complex potential or special function, such as the digamma function, which is defined as the derivative of the log of the gamma function. Click on this video if you want to see more, and piss off. Finally. Finally, it's over. Yes. Yes.
一個比較有趣啲嘅感情問題。
係你自己啊？
已經冇咗啦，係我朋友嘅。但因為咧，我朋友係唔係一定好渴求戀愛嗰啲啦，咁所以咧，佢上一次分咗手之後咧，都幾年冇拍拖啦。女仔嚟㗎，女仔。因為佢係鼓吹呢個順其自然啦，因為緣分。佛系。係啦，佛系，因為
你唔係順其自然啊，想溝唔到，你係失敗啊！你都翻得順其自然啦。我個 friend 係真係順其自然。
真係順其自然嘅，因為佢唔會出席嗰啲重底嗰啲 party，佢唔會嘅。咁之後佢就諗住翻工嘅時候會認識到啦。咁但係隨住年紀增長啦，大家都開始三字頭啦，佢發現身邊開始出現啲男仔追佢嗰啲咧，都比較奇怪少少。例如有一啲係諗住追佢嘅時候咧，想獻下殷勤啦，但係獻殷勤嘅時候咧，就會有少少情緒勒索佢啦，即係譬如幫你買個早餐，之後咧就會日講夜講足一個月都得。表揚自己啊！佢就日就話你個包好似好食啦，我排你個包好食啊！
你個包好似好食一樣嘢嚟㗎。
包好食啦！
唔係早餐嚟，呢個晚餐嚟㗎。
你個麵包好似好食啦！我排咗成個鐘先攞到㗎，即係話我想買嗰陣已經冇咗啦，咁咪冇買咯。係啊，冇買就覺得我係咪好衰啊？係啦，係啊。第二個就係奇怪啲嘅就係追我 friend 啦，但係講下嘅時候咧，會講下自己一啲召妓嘅經歷咯。我又理解點解。有理解，的確你有啊。唔係呢個係咪就係你追你個 friend 啦？
你理解我
我自己唔會嘅，但係有啲人對於嗰啲人嚟講，呢樣嘢可能喺佢生活裏邊就好似食飯咁啊嘛，甚至乎可能佢覺得係一個好有趣嘅話題，所以佢攞出嚟講。你追緊一個你中意嘅女仔喎，即係佢點會接受？佢已經你呢樣覺得，因為嗰個人嘅生活太狹窄啊，
所以得出嘅結論係咪即係年紀？
A lot of pop science outlets give a certain summary of quantum computing that I can almost guarantee leads to misconceptions. The summary goes something like this. In a classical computer, data is stored with bits, some sequence of ones and zeros, but in a quantum computer, you are able to represent every possible sequence of bits of some fixed length all at once, in one big thing known as a superposition. And sometimes the implication of these summaries is that quantum computers can be faster by basically doing whatever a classical computer would do, but to all of these sequences in parallel. Now, this does gesture at something that's kind of true, but let me see if I can prove to you why I think this leads to misconceptions, and I'll prove it using a quiz. To set it up, I want you to imagine that I have a mystery function, and I tell you that there's a certain secret number among all the numbers from 0 up to n-1, where if you plug that value into my function, it returns true, but if you were to plug in any other value, it returns false. And let's say you can't look at the innards of the function to learn anything about it. The only thing you're allowed to do with it is just try it out on numbers. The warm-up question is, how many times, on average, would you have to apply this mystery function in order to find the secret key? Well, if the setup was in an ordinary classical computer, there's really nothing better that you can do than guess and check. You go through all the numbers, and maybe you're lucky and find it early, maybe you're unlucky and it doesn't come up until later, but on average, with a list of n possibilities, it takes 1/2 of n attempts to find the key. Now, in computer science, people care about how runtimes scale. If you had a list 10 times as big, how much longer would it take? And computer scientists have a way of categorizing runtimes. They would call this one O of n, where that big O communicates that maybe there's some constants like the 1/2, or maybe some factors that grow slower than n, but the factor of n is what explains how quickly it scales as n grows. If n goes up by a factor of 10, the runtime also goes up by a factor of 10. Now, here's your quiz. For the equivalent of this setup, but in a quantum computer, what's the best runtime for finding the secret key? I've asked a variant of this quiz many times in a certain lecture that I've given over the years, and the options I typically offer are O of square root of n, O of log of n, O of log of n, and O of 1, where here O of 1 would mean that the runtime is just some constant that doesn't actually grow as n grows. Now, to be fair, I have not defined quantum computing. In fact, doing so from the ground up is going to be the goal of this video. So without showing you what this mystery function would look like in that setting, it's kind of an incoherent question. But it's not really meant as a quiz that I'm grading you on or anything. It's just meant to be a gut check of intuition before we dive in. In principle, it's the same task. Finding a needle in a haystack where you want to discover which value out of many options uniquely triggers some function. I asked this as a YouTube post last month, which 100,000 of you kindly answered. The most recent time I gave it live was to a group of Stanford students. I also posed it to those attending the International Math Olympiad, and in all of these and many other instances, the answer distribution looks very similar. The most common answer is always O of 1, and this is wrong, and I'm pretty sure that it stems from that misleading summary. That summary implies that you would put all of the n values that you need to search into this mysterious superposition, and then you would process them all in parallel, and then somehow the answer would be revealed. The second most common answer is typically O of log of n, and this is also wrong. You would call this an exponential speedup. For example, if you increase the size of the list by factors of 10, an O of log n runtime would only tick up by the same additive increment each time. Now, this wrong answer, I suspect, stems from a misconception about how much better quantum computers are in general. There are very certain special problems where you can achieve an exponential speedup. The most famous case is probably Shor's algorithm for factoring large numbers, but most problems are not like that. In this case, the correct answer is O of square root of n. And this is a lot more representative of the typical speedup that you could get with a quantum computer. In 1994, it was proven that a quantum computer could not possibly do any better than O of square root of n on this task. And then 2 years later, Love Grover found a specific procedure that actually achieves that runtime. So searching through a bag of 1,000,000 options takes on the order of 1,000 steps. A bag of 1,000,000,000,000 options takes on the order of 1,000,000. This big O actually hides something that's pretty fun, which is the constant of pi-fourths in the precise runtime, and that pi has its own whole fun story to tell, which I'll get to later. You might think that this puzzle with a mystery function triggered by one specific value is super contrived, but I want you to keep in mind this is meant to be a generic stand-in for any problem where you know how to quickly verify a solution, even if you don't know how to find that solution in the first place. This describes an enormous class of problems in computer science known as NP problems. So while a square root speedup is frankly not as earth-shattering as an exponential speedup would be, and while big O runtimes are often a lot less important than other practical considerations, it is thought-provoking that something like Grover's algorithm is even possible at all, providing this catch-all method for speeding up any NP problem. My goal with this lesson is to build up to a step-by-step walkthrough of how that algorithm works. It's actually very geometric and very beautiful, but we need to build up a lot of background in order to get there. The first 2/3 or so of the video will be spent building up the fundamentals of quantum computing, not with a set of analogies, which is
打鐵價升值其實有啲咩方法嘅咧？原因有幾種啊。第一，均值貴 regress。
Hello， 各位網友大家好！哇，近排做咩事？係咪執笠執得勁？有人嗌派錢喎，啊！財爺派錢啊，派錢喎！依家又要啦，係嘛？唔係依家先要㗎，一早啊要派錢㗎啦。啊，咁啊做咩事咧？無端端嗌派錢啊，咁騎呢咧？我喺網上面見到啊，因為咁啊，喂，如果有機會。可唔可以啊？財爺派錢，你哋支唔支持先？支持俾個 like 咧，係嘛？咁啊，請俾個 like 支持一下先啦。咁啊，今集我哋會同大家講下啲結業潮嘅問題啦。咁啊，財爺因為近期佢對於餐飲業界係咪即係難撈啊？咁啊市道差，咁啊突然之間就財爺有啲妙計。咁啊嗰個妙計我一先講啦。其實最妙嗰個計就係派錢嘅啫嚇。唔係佢嗱。呢一個位置，首先大家都明白到依家本地嗰個零售或者嗰個業，即係佢哋嗰啲餐飲業啊又好啦，乜都好啦嚇。總之就成個市道嗰個困局喺邊度先？你就係少咗人嚟消費啊嘛。無論本地嘅好，無論係即係叫做旅客又好咧，比起之前一定係。嗱，即係你又話，依家唔係喎，個市道好好多喎，係咪啊？好翻好多啦之類嘅。嗱，睇下你攞咩時候去比咯。有人話差過疫情㗎，喂，其實疫情即係有人又用呢個差過疫情去講翻依家香港個市況啊，個實況啊，背後嘅原因就係好簡單一個道理。你疫情嗰時候，大家冇得出去玩，又未有人移民，係咪？咁啊，大家就硬掘喺度消費，咁所以你即係仲有700幾萬人喺度使錢啊嘛，即係差極都有個底裝喺度。咁但係你一正常復常之後，正所謂走得就走，北上玩就玩，我遊，係嘛？咁啊，你嗰個數字係。一定係會比起疫情嘅時候少嘅。我當你啊，你又話唔係喎，咁我當你200萬人走咗出去玩，走咗出去玩，連埋北上消費，咁你仲有500萬鬆啲嘅人啦，即係扣埋移咗民嗰啲咁樣，咁你仲有500幾萬人喺度嘅噃，係嘛？唔計遊客，淨係講本地消費，咁喂，起碼都仲有一堆數字，咁你係咪差過疫情先？呢個數字係。一定係差過疫情㗎啦，因為你之前700零萬人硬掘啦嘛。好啦，咁市道喺23、24、25我當你23，因為係3月幾4月先復常啦。咁你係有大概我記得呢個月份。咁你24年4年啦，25年啦，依家啦過咗大半年啦。咁啊見到有好多唔同嘅數字都出咗嚟啦嚇。咁啊其中講到話香港嗰啲空置率上升到去12.1%，接近疫情高峰時期啦。咁所以其實某程度上邊即係香港咁感覺上面個零售真係未復常嘅。好啦，咁阿波叔又講咗好多古靈精怪嘢啦。佢就話鬥平冇出路嘅，鬥平冇出路。喂，咁如果唔鬥平，咁啊鬥咩好呢？係嘛，鬥服務態度好。係咪鬥呢啲嘢咧？有人就覺得啦，冇乜都唔好鬥，最好就派錢，派錢就最好啦。人哋澳門都派錢啦，點解我哋唔派錢呢？係嘛？喂，人哋都肯派啦，你話佢派咗咁多年，冇理由今年唔派。咁人哋今年個市道係咪特別好啫？所以有個咁嘅潛力可以派。我哋呢，依家其實即係當然啦，有人就覺得你唔好即係叫話唔好波叔唔好諗埋啲古靈精怪嘢啦。派消費券最實際啦。其實我覺得唔單止係你話市民想嘅，可能市民嗰個諗法都未必咁強烈，反而可能係對嗰啲商家呢，佢哋嘅諗法會比較大。舉例啫嘛，我唔知即係 各位聽眾們啊，你有幾多係做生意啦嚇？又或者有幾多依家仲係做緊生意，或者可能你哋好多都係犀利啦，退咗休係咪？係一早退休，我20歲已經退休㗎啦嚇，係咪？即係可能有啲係咁啊，恭喜你咯！我真係。咁你有啲就可能話，唔係我打工仔嚟嘅嚇，咁唔緊要啦嚇，你屬於邊個範疇都冇乜問題。但係我哋去諗一樣嘢就話，可能大家對依家即係派錢好麻木嘅嚇，派消費券好麻木㗎。派唔派都冇乜所謂啦，橫掂我都北上消費㗎啦嚇。我一到禮拜六日，即係我呢幾日我同我啲朋友喺度探討緊，啱啱我身邊有幾個朋友咧，即係同一日嘅。係啊，真係好奇怪㗎，即係又係同一日喺禮拜日翻嚟香港，大家都經港珠澳翻嚟，大家都遇到咧塞到阿媽都唔認得，搞到夜一夜先翻屋企。我唔止一個朋友，幾個朋友啊，身邊都係咁同我講，唉，真係下次咪鬼啊，大佬啊，真係一係就禮拜一先翻，一係咧禮拜日晏晝上晝好翻，如果唔係真係塞死啊，激死啊喺嗰度啊！好啊。所以點解我話喂，你而家大家對連派消費券嗰種感覺都麻木咧，就係咁解啦。因為大家已經有另一個方法去消費、去娛樂，佢可以喂，我唔需要，即係有人覺得係反而提升咗添喎。即係你話激唔激死啊？去到呢個位置，喂，你以為我北上消費就係降級消費降級啊？唔係啊，係性價比高啊！我用一個比較平嘅價錢，我當你8折7折類似啦嘅價錢，都分分鐘唔止添，1/4價錢添喎。係啊，真係啊！嗱，當你4個人打邊爐喺上面300蚊，300零蚊啦，普普通通唔係啲咩特別嘢先啦。你喺香港4個人打邊爐，隨時1200蚊。你嗰啲任食咪300蚊咯，300蚊位差唔多啦，連埋加服務費300蚊。你同喺深圳打個邊爐300零蚊，係咪真？喂，真係1/4啊，大佬個價錢。你300蚊一位同300蚊4位啊！咁喂，我都係打邊爐啫喎，我都係食嘅啫喎，我都係飲嘅咯喎。任食啦，你任唔任食你都食得唔到幾多啦，係咪啊？我當你300蚊可以食到你飽啦，你想食乜都得啦，有啦，係咪啊？飲咩都有。好啦。其實冇消費降級到嘅，某程度上面，分分鐘可能有人覺得我用咗唔止同係比較仲平嘅價錢，反而個食物啊、服務質素啊，最緊要服務質素啦，係有所提升添喎。咁我點解留喺度消費呢？係嘛？去到呢個位置，所以點解我話喂，你而家有人覺得連派消費券嗰種吸引力都唔會有啊？即係如果阿波叔可能你呢一下嗌消費券，你話好啦，見大家咁或者個市道或者可能嗰啲餐飲業啊、零售業啊見到佢哋疲於奔命啊好辛苦啊，苦苦支撐啊，好啦，我哋派錢啊，政府刺激下個經濟順便食住個盛事係嘛，咁跟住咧就派3000蚊咁，我舉例啊，派3000蚊。冇乜所謂啦，唔派我都冇乜所謂。可能有人咁噶，咪好咯，多3000蚊咪買下啲柴米油鹽醬醋茶咯，係咪？我咪繼續北上消費咯。會唔會咁樣咧？會，係會噶。當然啦，你話你派3萬蚊就未必啦。派3萬蚊你就可能真係好多人留喺香港消費啦，因為香港個物價係嘛，同你個消費券啲人使落邊度咧係成一個正比嘅。當初試過派1萬嗰時候，記唔記得？哇！因為嗰時候疫情啊嘛，其實你都冇得周圍走，你就硬掘喺度消費。如果你呢一派消費券，即係有人覺得阿波叔佢因為佢話市道差，鬥平冇出路嘅需要創新咁樣，咁有人就覺得啦，波叔你不如諗下點樣派消費券振興啲人留喺香港消費啦。反而我覺得，如果阿波叔呢一刻佢話就算派消費券，佢個金額唔大呢，未必幫不到，即係各行各業嘅。之前派消費券呢，就算你話個金額當然冇咁即係冇我話3000蚊咁少啦，但係你諗下，其實對零售業，尤其是超市啊、電商嗰啲係有啲幫助，餐飲業都有幫助。 大家都願意喺度食下飯啊，係嘛？大家出嚟柴娃娃。但係如果你話而家因為唔係我哋又要睇住荷包又話赤字又係剩，派得計2000、3000嘅話咧，咁大家寧願就全部買晒日用品啊！我食咗2餸飯算數啦，係嘛？2餸飯收消費券，因為八通啊嘛，有機會係或者佢收支付寶啊嘛，可能用咗消費券。我哋即係或者都會有嘅，可能出去食一餐好啲咯，大家係嘛？呢餐我嘅係咪？下餐你嘅咁樣之類咁樣，唔緊要，冇所謂，我覺得就係嘛？呢個好簡單嘅啫。咁但係其實分分鐘嗰個影響力一定係冇之前咁犀利咁但係叫做聊勝於無咯。如果你個金額細嘅話，其實。當然啦，你話其實有人話我過咗財政預算案㗎啦噃，點會有機會再派消費券？其實冇所謂㗎，即係政府可能突然之間舉例又佢冇即係佢可以用好多唔同嘅因由都得㗎喎，即係有啲咩慶祝日子例如抗戰勝利80週年。
嗌個 burger 限高達150蚊，抵啲就係好食啲，輸入優惠碼平得掉，直限高達150蚊。
元気になった。肌ってあなたの親友みたいなものだ。
One of the big mysteries in Peppa's world is the fact that humans exist, but almost never show up. Have you noticed that Evie's birth might bring new kids into Peppa's universe? Evie Pig. Over the past few months, the whole world has been surprised by the arrival of Evie Pig, Peppa's new baby sister. But what most people haven't noticed is that this new character's arrival will bring a lot of changes to the show. One of them is the arrival of human characters. But how do we know that? Honestly, it's pretty easy to explain. Mummy Pig's pregnancy announcement was made on real-world TV, and on the day Evie was born, a royal family messenger was used to announce the new character. All of this happened on the streets of London, and it was the first time ever that characters from Peppa's universe talked to real-world people. That means Evie's arrival is changing an important rule in the show, and from now on, humans are going to start showing up more often in the cartoon. It's very likely that Evie Pig will have some friends who are human and will appear in upcoming episodes. That means new characters will start living in Peppa's town, and they'll be human kids. That also means you're about to find out everything about the mystery of human kids in Peppa's world. Another Cinewave is starting now. Books. Did you know there are official Peppa books where human kids appear? And even better, they're real people. There are some official books from the show called Peppa and Me. The idea behind these books is for fans who love Peppa's world to send photos to the production team. That way, the creators design a character that looks just like you. That means that in Peppa's universe, there are already human kids going on adventures with Peppa and her friends, which means it won't be long before the Peppa show starts featuring more humans in future episodes. Could Evie Pig's new friend be a real person? There's a big chance it could be someone famous. That's because, if the books feature real-life people turned into Peppa characters, there's nothing stopping someone everybody knows from becoming a Peppa character too. But who could it be? That's another mystery. Swimming. Still talking about the Peppa books, one of them focuses on swimming lessons. In this story, the human child has to learn how to swim with Peppa, and we all know Peppa can be a great teacher. You might remember in the episode Swimming, Daddy Pig takes the family to the town pool. In that story, our little pig still needs arm floaties for safety, but Daddy Pig teaches her to not be afraid. What does this mean? The big reveal is that in the book, we find out that the human character was actually there at the pool during that episode, and Peppa's mysterious friend learns how to swim. In upcoming episodes, human kids are definitely going to start showing up, and fans will realize they've always been there. And we know what you're thinking now. Wait, how could humans always have been a part of the show if we've never seen them? It's super simple. That's just how things work in Peppa's town. There are friends that everyone knows exist, but they don't live close to the main characters. That's how it is for Aunt Dottie, Mrs. Badger, Mrs. Cow's daughter, and others. Nothing says human kids haven't always existed in Peppa's universe, and soon we're going to show you that they've already appeared. You just didn't notice. So stay with us in this video. Would you like to be a Peppa Pig character? Comment with hashtag Peppa so we can get to know ya. School. Another story that involves mysterious human kids in Peppa's universe happened in the adventure Going to School, when our main character has another school day with Madame Gazelle. In this story, Peppa's teacher teaches the kids about letters and numbers, and later, during recess, they head outside where Peppa teaches her human friend how to jump in muddy puddles, our main character's favorite game. Even Madame Gazelle joins in on the fun, which is super cool. But why is this story so important? If you pay close attention, you'll see that the human character is one of Peppa's classmates, and that means at Peppa's school, there are many other students, and some of them are humans. In upcoming episodes, we might get to meet these friends of Peppa and find out if they have human families living in Peppa's town. If that turns out to be true, then get ready for a big change in the Pig family's universe, because now, human kids are going to be Madame Gazelle's students. Would you like to be one of Peppa's classmates? Daisy. Actually, we already know one of our favorite Piggy's human friends. Her name is Daisy, and she's one of the characters from the official Peppa Pig stage play, which is performed at one of Peppa's theme parks. Daisy arrives in Peppa's town on a normal day, but she's lost because she doesn't know the area. The girl needs to get to school for her very first day of class. That's when Pedro, Pony, and George help Daisy get to school. After meeting Madame Gazelle and having a day of lessons, the human girl takes the bus with them to the forest, because Peppa's friends are going camping. Do you remember the episode where Peppa's class went to the woods to set up tents and go camping? According to the stage play, Daisy was there. Do you get how mysterious that is? Why have we never seen this girl in the show? In upcoming episodes, there's a very good chance this character will show up along with Peppa's new friends, but the show will need to explain this mystery of where the humans are hiding somewhere in the town. Farm Girl. There's another human character who showed up in the series episodes, but very few people noticed. During Peppa's trip to New York, there's a huge billboard in Times Square showing a farm girl standing next to some sheep. This girl is a human child, and apparently she lives on a farm. If there's a giant billboard of her in such a famous place like Times Square, that means she's famous, maybe even a TV star. Another piece of evidence is that this human girl appears again in the episode Children's Festival when Peppa and her family go enjoy the day at the town park. She's on another billboard along with Pirate Redbeard and a wild cow, once again showing that she's a girl who lives with animals. Could this character live with Mrs. Badger? It's possible, since both of them are farmers. This girl could appear in future episodes. Do you believe that? And we can't believe you're still not subscribed to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our daily videos. Princess. Now let's talk about some characters who are definitely going to show up soon in upcoming episodes. The princes of England, like the Queen's grandkids and great-grandkids. You know that in Peppa's world, there's a character who rules the entire country? It's Queen Elizabeth, who everyone thought lived all alone in Buckingham Palace. When Peppa and her friends go visit Her Majesty, she's completely alone in the palace. And for a long time, fans believed there were no other human characters. But that all changed with the birth of Evie Pig. The new little piggy was announced by a royal messenger, probably because Queen Elizabeth ordered the announcement. But that's not all, and now you're going to understand why the princes are about to appear in the show. Evie Pig was born at the Lindo wing of St. Mary's Hospital in London, the exact same place where the princes of England were born. That's a clue that in the future, the Queen and Peppa show will introduce her family to the main characters, and of course, they'll be humans. It's super important to think about this because there are theories that Evie Pig might become the new princess of the Piggy universe. So meeting the royal family would feel totally natural for Peppa's little sister. Are you ready to meet these new characters? Santa Claus. Now let's think about something super simple when it comes to Peppa's world. Santa Claus exists, right? And that means he travels all over delivering presents to kids. Santa is a human character, and that's a clue that he delivers presents to human children too. In fact, it's very possible that some of Santa's helpers are actually human kids, but Peppa's friends just think they're elves. But here's the mystery. Peppa travels to so many places around the world like New York, Texas, London, Paris, Rome, and even Australia, but in none of these cities do we see human characters. No adults, no kids. Yes, we know that in New York the farm girl appears, but that only happens on a billboard. But it's very likely that new human kids will show up in future episodes next season. This makes sense because in Peppa's world, there are already 6 different Christmas stories. So it's more than obvious that Santa Claus will come back and we'll see him delivering presents all over the world. But when that episode airs on TV, will the cartoon finally show more human kids? That would be a huge change for the show. Mystery. Another big mystery about human characters in Peppa Pig shows up in some really important places and creates a huge question. If the world is run by animals, then why are humans the ones appearing on statues and coins? In the episode where George is with Grandpa Pig, the little pig finds an old coin. And if you look closely, you'll notice that this tiny piece of gold has a human face engraved on it. In the New York episode, when Peppa is standing on top of a building, she looks out at the Statue of Liberty, but instead of being an animal like the characters from Peppa's universe, the statue is a human. That's a huge mystery because in Peppa's world, human characters almost never appear. But when they do show up in episodes, they're always super important. The Queen is human, Santa Claus too, and the other person we've seen is Pirate Redbeard, who's the captain of a treasure-filled ship. That means humans are very important and very powerful in Peppa's world. But if they almost never appear, it could be a clue that they all live somewhere far away, where animals aren't allowed. Maybe it's a super rich place like a paradise made just for humans. If that's true, then that theory about humans being extinct is wrong. What do you think about that? We think it's time for you to keep having fun with our channel. That's why we've picked out 2 more videos for everyone to enjoy. We'll see you in the next video. See you soon!
Pentomino facts. Here are some disclaimers. Okay, go. First off, what is a pentomino? Well, this is a square, except we're going to call it a cell. Remember that. A pentomino is just 5 of these cells attached to each other vertically or horizontally. No diagonals allowed. There are 12 different pentominos, excluding rotations and reflections. Every pentomino has a name, and that name is a letter of the alphabet that it resembles. Some pentominos look exactly like their letter counterparts. Some are, well, not exactly accurate to their shape, but we'll call them by that anyways. Here are the names of all 12. F-I-L-N-P-T-U-V-W-X-Y-Z. Got it? Okay, now for the facts. Part 1. Symmetry. 5 of the pentominos have no symmetry. They are F, L, N, P, and Y. And that sucks for them. 6 or half of the pentominos have regular symmetry. T and U have one axis of symmetry. V and W also have one axis of symmetry, except it is diagonal. I has 2 axes of symmetry, and X has 4 axes of symmetry, where 2 are diagonal. As for rotational symmetry, I and Z have 180-degree rotational symmetry. X has 90-degree rotational symmetry. I and X are the only 2 pentominoes to have both regular and rotational symmetry. Z is the only pentomino to have rotational symmetry without having regular symmetry. Part 2. Tiling. Every single pentomino can infinitely tile the plane. What that specifically means is that you can lay pentominos down on a 2D plane and place them infinitely on that plane without having any gaps between the pentominos. Most of them have infinite different ways that they can technically tile the plane. We'll start with the I pentomino, because it's the simplest shape, just a rectangle. You can have all of the pentominos upright like this, or you could have 1 row horizontal separating the upright tiles, or 2, or 3, and that keeps going upwards, so the I pentomino has infinite ways it can periodically tile the plane. This same logic can be applied to rectangles of any size. Other pentominos can be joined to form a rectangle. For instance, 2 L pentominos can be joined like this to create a rectangle, which means that L also has infinite ways of tiling the plane. P has the exact same property with this configuration. This isn't just true for rectangles though. For instance, look at this Y tiling. It doesn't create a rectangle, but it does create a row of Y pentominos that extend infinitely in either direction. However, you can shift 1 row, exactly 1 cell to the left, or 2, or do every other row, or every 3rd row. Therefore, there are infinite different ways that pentomino can tile a plane. You could do this exact same thing with the N pentomino as well. Basically, if you are able to create a line that extends infinitely either vertically or horizontally, there are infinite different ways that pentomino can tile a plane. The W pentomino also follows that logic, except with larger rows, and the F pentomino also does it with even larger rows. All of the other pentominoes it's a little bit harder as they don't create infinite straight lines, however, it can still be done for most of them. This V tiling can have one of these one-to-one diagonal rows flipped 180 degrees, meaning you can flip 2, 3, or infinite. You can apply the same logic to the Z tiling, however, this U tiling has infinite solutions because it can have one row tiling infinite with the U's in one orientation and another row perfectly connected to it with the U's oriented 90 degrees. And you can mix and match which orientation you want on top of each other infinitely. The same thing can be applied to this T tiling as these two rows are different. Finally, that leaves the X pentomino, which is the only one that cannot tile the plane with an infinite number of combinations, as it only has one plus its reflection. This can be proven like so. Let's place this X pentomino right here. Now, this cell only has two ways it can be filled, if the pentomino goes here or here. However, if you look at both of these options, they're actually the same, just reflections of each other. Let's take this one for example. Now we have the exact same two choices here. If we place the next one in the opposite orientation of the last one, you get this. However, this cell cannot be filled in, meaning that deduction was wrong, and it has to be the other orientation. That deduction keeps on going infinitely, creating this row. This now makes it so these cells only have one way they can be filled, and boom. That extends infinitely, and there's your only way of tiling the plane with X pentominoes. Part 3. Drawing lines through the pentominoes. Particularly, which pentominoes can we draw a straight line in so that it passes through every single cell? 5 of them can easily have a line pass through them, with wiggle room on both ends. Those are I, L, N, W, and Z. None of the other 7 pentominoes can easily have a line pass through them. In all of them, you have to include the corners and the edges of the cell for it to work. As for those which require corners and edges, Y, F, and P all have one choke point. Y and F have their choke points directly at the end of their line, while P has it in the middle. V and U have choke points at both ends, making only one line possible. V is the only shape in which the line has to cross 3 corners for it to work, and U is the only one in which the line actually needs to cross a whole edge and not just corners for it to work. It is also the only one in which the line does not actually pass through the middle of any cells at all, only on the edges and corners. Like V and U, X also has both ends restricted to be in specific spots, but has 2 places those restricted spots can go instead of 1. And finally, T is the only pentomino where it is impossible to draw a straight line through all 5 cells. Believe me, I've tried. Part 4. Tetrominoes. Let's look at tetrominoes. Tetrominoes are the same thing as pentominoes, except they are made of 4 cells, not 5. They are L, O, I, T, and F. In other words, loits. Unlike the pentomino, they actually all can be unscrambled to form a word, toils. Anyways, of these 5 tetrominoes, in which pentominoes can they be found? The O tetromino can only be found in one pentomino, the P pentomino. The I tetromino can be found in 3 pentominoes, I, L, and Y. It can actually be found twice in the I pentomino. The S tetromino can be found in 4 pentominoes, F, N, P, and W, with W being the only one in which it appears twice. The T tetromino can be found in 5 of the pentominoes, F, P, T, Y, X. The first 4 in which it only can be found once, and the X pentomino in which it can be found 4 times, the most out of any other tetromino. And finally, the L tetromino appears in 9 of them, all of them except I, W, and X. Of those 9, F, L, N, P, and Y have it only appear once, and in V, Z, T, and U it appears twice. Looking back at all of this, 6 of the pentominoes only have one tetromino type appear in them. The I pentomino only has the I tetromino, the W only has the S tetromino, the X pentomino only has the T tetromino, and the V, U, and Z pentominoes only have the L tetromino. 3 of the pentominoes have exactly 2 types of tetromino appear in them, L, N, and T. All 3 of them have the L pentomino, but L also has the I tetromino, N also has the S tetromino, and T also has the T tetromino. 2 of the pentominoes have 3 types of tetromino appear in them, being the F and Y pentominoes, both of which contain the L and T tetromino, but the F pentomino also has the S tetromino, while the Y pentomino also has the I tetromino. Only one pentomino, the P pentomino, contains 4 different kinds of tetrominoes, L, O, T, and S, all of them except for the I. Finally, if we look at the number of tetrominoes represented in the pentominoes, ignoring different shapes, 7 of them contain 2 tetrominoes, being I, L, N, U, V, W, Z. 3 of them contain 3 tetrominoes, being F, T, and Y, and 2 of them contain 4 tetrominoes, being P and X. Keep note of these pentomino groups because these pentominoes being grouped together in these categories will, surprisingly, keep popping up in future facts. Part 5. Triominoes. Let's go one omino shorter to triominoes. There are only two types of triomino, the L and the I, and every single pentomino contains both of them, except for the I pentomino, which only contains I triominoes, and the W pentomino, which only contains L triominoes. Instead of going through each and every single pentomino and the triominoes inside of them, here is a bar graph that shows you A, how many triominoes are in each pentomino, B, how many I triominoes are in each pentomino, and C, how many L triominoes are in each pentomino. You'll notice that these are grouped in the exact same groups that I made in the last fact about how many tetrominoes each one of these pentominoes contain. I, L, N, U, V, W, Z containing 3 triominoes and 2 tetrominoes, F, T, and Y containing 4 triominoes and 3 tetrominoes, and P and X containing 6 triominoes and 4 tetrominoes. Part 6. Looking at all the cells between the pentominoes. Between all 12 of the pentominoes, there are exactly 60 cells. Of these 60 cells, a grand total of 28, nearly half of them only connect to one other cell within that pentomino. One pentomino contains only one of these cells, being the P. 7 pentominoes contain exactly 2 of those cells, being I, L, N, P, U, W, and Z. 3 of the pentominoes contain exactly 3 of those cells, being F, T, and Y. And finally, only one of those pentominoes contain exactly 4 of those cells, being the X. 27 of the 60 cells connect to exactly 2 other cells, exactly one less than the ones that only connect to one cell. These are nearly exactly the same groups as the ones that only contain one connection, with I, L, N, P, U, W, and Z all containing exactly 3 of these connections. However, the P pentomino also joins this group also with 3 connections. F, T, and Y are also grouped together again, as they each contain exactly 1 cell with 2 connections. Meanwhile, X contains 0 cells with 2 connections. Of these 27 cells, 12 of them connect cells on opposite sides of the cell, while the other 15 connections happen side by side. 4 of the 60 cells connect to exactly 3 other cells. Yet again, these are the exact same groups as before, except that P pentomino joins the F, T, and Y grouping of having exactly 1, and the X pentomino joins the other 7 with having 0. And finally, the last of the 60 cells connects to exactly 4 other cells, that being the center cell in the X pentomino. All of these yet again contain the exact same groupings as the last 2 parts, excluding 4 cell connections since that's only a single pentomino. However, there is one notable difference. The P pentomino jumps between all groups except for being in a group with the X pentomino, like it has been for the past 2 facts. It's in its own group for 1 cell connections, joins the group of I, L, N, V, U, W, Z for 2 cell connections, joins the group of F, T, and Y for 3 cell connections, and is in the group with all but X for 4 cell connections. Part 7. Rectangles. As we have been over already, there are 60 cells combined between all 12 pentomino shapes. 60 is a highly composite number that can form several different sizes of rectangles. Can we get all 12 pentominoes to fit inside every type of these rectangles? Some of them we very obviously cannot, such as 1 by 60 and 2 by 30 due to half of the pentominoes needing a 3 by 3 area to fit into. The other 4 rectangles all have solutions though. 3 by 20, despite being very constrained, still has exactly 2 solutions. Here are both of them. They're essentially identical, apart from one group of 7 pentominoes being rotated 180 degrees. 4 by 15 has 368 different solutions, but I am not going to go over all of them because it would be extremely painful for me to do so here's exactly one. 5 by 12 has 1010 different solutions, but I am not going to go over all of them because I would most likely claw my hair out while trying to do so. Here's exactly one. And finally, 6 by 10 has 2,339 different solutions, but I am not going to go over all of them because I would most likely gouge my eyes out while trying to do so. Here's exactly one. What about creating a rectangle of empty space enclosed inside a rectangle of pentominoes? The biggest one possible that can be created is a 4 by 7 rectangle of empty space with this arrangement of pentominoes. Part 8. The final part of this video is using these shapes in a puzzle I invented. The goal is to use the pentominoes in a grid of cells to create the longest path of empty cells possible, where the path will always take the shortest path. You can decide which cell contains the start and ending points. What that means is you have to use the pentominoes to make the path as long as possible. However, you are not allowed to use the same pentominoes more than once. 1 by 1 and 2 by 2 squares can't place any pentominoes. The 3 by 3 square is pretty trivial. Placing down the P pentomino, you can create a path that's 4 cells long. However, you can actually create a longer path by using no pentominoes and placing the start and end cell on opposite corners. The 4 by 4 is also pretty trivial as it only has one solution, and that is placing the P pentomino like this in order to create a path of 11 that circles perfectly around it. The 5 by 5 square is where it starts getting pretty interesting. Using one pentomino is quickly ruled out because using 2 pentominoes easily creates a solution of 15. However, there appear to be multiple solutions using 2 pentominoes. In trying to find every single possible 5x5 solution, I came across 6 possible configurations for the 10 cells to be filled in by pentominoes that 1. Create a perfect path of 15 unused cells, and 2. Can actually have pentominoes placed in them. What that means is that there's configurations like this that exist, but obviously you can't place a pentomino on that cell because it doesn't connect to any other cells. There's also configurations like these, which do have valid places for the pentominoes to be placed in. However, the 2 pentominoes that are forced are the same pentomino, so it doesn't count. Anyways, when looking at which pentominoes can fit into these configurations, the I pentomino can't go in any of the configurations whatsoever because there's only 4 cells long in each of them. The W pentomino also can't go in any configurations without splitting up the remaining 5 cells. All of the other pentominoes have at least one configuration in which they fit to create a path. The X pentomino can only be placed right here with the U pentomino above it. The N pentomino can only be placed right here with the P pentomino. The T pentomino can only be placed here, also with the P pentomino. The Y pentomino can only be placed right here with the P pentomino and flipping the Y vertically and placing that with the U pentomino. Also a shape that has 2 configurations with the P and U pentomino is the F pentomino. However, that requires moving the F pentomino even more. The Z pentomino also only has 2 locations, but that's with the V instead of the U, and with P. The L pentomino has 3 locations, 2 of them with the P pentomino that are surprisingly quite different, and 1 with the U pentomino, which is probably my favorite configuration of all of them as it creates a perfect spiral. The U pentomino has 4 locations, all of which have been shown already, but here are all of them again. The U is in the exact same spot in every single configuration. The V pentomino has 5 locations, and astonishingly, 4 of them are with the P pentomino, the most any pairing of pentominoes have. The other is with the Z pentomino. All 5 configurations with the V pentomino have it in exactly the same spot, just like U. And finally, the P pentomino has a grand total of 11 pairings, completely demolishing the other pentominoes. Out of the 6 configurations shown at the start, 3 of them can only have 1 configuration. One of them has 2 configurations, one has 4 configurations, and the final one has 7. This leads to this chart showing every single possible pairing of pentominoes and how many they create. Although, I guess we can just block off half of it as to not make it too confusing. The 6x6 square is where it surprisingly stops getting interesting, as initially it seems like we would be doing the exact same thing by using 3 pentominoes and forcing a path using all 21 remaining cells, but there is surprisingly a way to make a 22 cell path with only 2 pentominoes, which is this. You can also flip the Y shape, creating this solution. Since there are only 4 unused cells here, there's no way using 3 shapes would work, as that 5th cell would have to come off the path. I was unable to find any other 22 cell solutions. I'm not sure if these are the only ones, but after searching for a whole 30 minutes, I couldn't come up with anything else surprisingly. Then, 7x7 and above is where I stopped being confident about my findings. For 7x7, I found this 29 cell configuration with 3 pentominoes, where you could place just about any 3x3 or 2x3 shape in the place of the T and still have it work. It feels like a path of 30 is possible, but it was just out of reach no matter how hard I tried. For 8x8, I found this perfect 5 pentomino 39 cell path, meaning a longer path would have to use 4 pentominoes, but I couldn't get a path with only 4 pentominoes to go above 36. So I believe this is the maximum for 8x8. For 9x9, I found several paths of 47 leaving 4 unused cells, but I could not get it to 48 no matter how much I tried. 48 feels just on the realm of possibility, but if it does exist, I'm not the person who's able to find it. For the 10x10, I was able to find this path of 56 with 4 unused cells after an hour of only getting 55s. I don't think this goes higher, as there seems to be no wiggle room anywhere, and getting this 56 is already hard enough as is, but who knows. For the 11x11, I was able to find this 66 after an hour of only getting 65s, but it seems much more likely that this goes to 67 and above than 10x10 going above 56, as this board can be arranged into 68 if we allow duplicates. The 12x12 was surprisingly easy for me, as I was able to find this 77 in only 5 minutes or so, and it felt like there was absolutely no way this could be improved. For the 13x13, I was stuck on 83 for a while, but I was able to barely push it to an 84. And this solution is extremely strange, because it's the first instance of a shape being completely isolated on the edge of the board, that being the V piece. However, 13x13 is also where the strategy begins to change, as you now have to use every single pentomino, and the strategy shifts from putting as many pieces into a tight area as possible to being able to stretch the shapes out as far as possible. And that only continues to be the main strategy as the boards get larger and larger. The 14x14 was the highest board size I've chose to do, and I found 2 88 solutions, the second of which infuriated me, as it seemed like it was so close to being an 89 or 90, but one piece, usually the X, is just unable to be fit in a useful place in order to make it work. Overall, I think this is an interesting concept that I don't believe has been done anywhere else, and I would love to see other people give a crack at it. In particular, the boards from 7x7 to 14x14, I have no idea if those are optimal. Well, I'm pretty sure 8x8 is. Some of them certainly feel like they can go larger, but I have no way of knowing how to make it happen. I also have no idea for board sizes above 14x14, or even board sizes that aren't perfectly square. For instance, maybe 5x9 has a super interesting, extremely tight solution. Someone could even probably program something that finds all solutions for a board of a particular size. However, that person is definitely not me, because again, I am an art student, not a computer science student. If you actually want to try any of this, do share it with me at this Discord server. Anyways, those were my pentomino facts. This video probably doesn't make that much sense, but I love these goofy ass shapes so much that I just had to make a video on them. Okay, bye. Overall, I think this is an interesting concept. I'm recording, pal. In particular,
各位網友早晨啊，我係鄺俊宇。今日係2025年6月25號禮拜三啊。今次同各位網友一齊講講香港各大最新嘅時事熱話。咁啊，先報一報最新嘅天氣情況啦。咁啊，首先呢，1號風球呢現正懸掛㗎。咁啊，天文台最新嘅預測如何呢？同各位一齊講講。咁啊，另邊廂亦都講講啊。咁啊，尋晚呢喺將軍澳啦係發生雙屍命案㗎。咁啊，據報咧係有兩夫婦啦，係一齊燒炭死亡㗎，係點樣嘅消息呢？同各位一齊講講。咁啊，另邊廂亦都講講香港各大最新嘅時事熱話。講落去之前記得撳訂閱，免費訂閱鄺俊宇嘅頻道，睇廣告越長係對鄺仔最大嘅支持啊！衷心多謝各位老友記。事不宜遲，先睇睇呢一則最新消息。根據 HK 嘅最新報導啊，咁啊講緊啦，天文台啊就話咧，1號風球喺今朝早禮拜4嘅早上咧係繼續維持㗎，咁啊驟雨會增加同埋有雷暴啊。
就係 VLT， 結得起就係我 VLT。我食講呢啲，隨手一包 VLT。中意潮啲定錯啲，型我話事。運動要 burn 卡路里，零糖零卡啱晒你。我有我嘅 selfie 角度，貼出我嘅真我態度，貼地創意好 witty，飲啖檸茶更 happy。結得起就係我 VLT。
咁啊，內文提到啦，天文台咧喺尋晚更新預測，就話咧熱帶低氣壓會喺禮拜4今朝早咧喺本港西南約400公里左右掠過，咁啊隨後咧登陸雷州半島，咁1號戒備信號咧會喺今朝早咧係繼續維持㗎。天文台就話咧，除非嗰個嘅熱帶低氣壓採取較為接近珠江口嘅路徑，或者顯著增強啊，否則本港普遍地區持續吹強風嘅機會咧較低㗎。不過預料本港禮拜4啊，今日咧間中有狂風驟雨同埋雷暴㗎，咁啊海面啊亦都有湧浪咁話喎。以上嚟自 HK 嘅報導，咁啊提一提各位啊，咁啊首先而家咧就繼續掛緊1號風球，咁啊另邊廂估計咧狂風雷暴啦喺今日晏啲咧就會殺到㗎啦。咁啊各位嘅老友記咧多啲留意天氣情況，咁啊今日出街嘅話咧可能要帶遮㗎。咁啊另邊廂估計咧呢個狂風雷暴咧有機會唔止1日嘅喎，咁啊仲要視乎嗰個嘅低氣壓採取嘅路徑㗎。咁啊各位嘅老友記多加留意天氣狀況，大家都要身體健康啦。另外亦都講本地消息，咁有關咧將軍澳嘅雙屍命案㗎。咁啊，建明村夫婦咧，疑似咧係燒炭死亡啊！咁啊，女兒揭發再報警㗎。內文提到將軍澳發生雙屍命案，咁啊，尋日6月25號傍晚6點44分，咁啊，警方接獲一名女子報警，話佢嘅父母咧喺建明村明月樓一個單位裏邊暈倒。咁啊，救護人員到場㗎，證實兩人啊倒卧於上址嘅一張床之上，旁邊係有一盤燒過嘅炭。 咁啊，兩人現場被證實死亡㗎。咁啊，死因有待驗屍之後確定喎。咁啊，探員呢到現場搜證㗎，喺現場檢。據悉，女死者姓陳㗎，66歲。咁啊，男死者姓李㗎，72歲。據報兩名死者都有精神病記錄喎。以上嚟自 HK 嘅報導，願死者安息啊！咁啊，據報尋晚呢，將軍澳呢係發生雙屍命案㗎。咁啊，兩公婆呢係一齊燒炭死亡啊！咁啊，女兒揭發㗎，咁啊可惜呢已經呢係救唔翻。咁啊，令 B 商呢仲要了解佢哋嘅動機㗎，願死者安息。咁啊，另邊廂呢亦都講講姜濤最新嘅情況啊。咁啊，據報姜濤尋晚呢係見記者㗎。根據 Yahoo 新聞嘅報導啊，姜濤墮海過後見記者，咁啊承認呢係有飲酒食藥㗎。咁啊睇夕陽過後頭暈啊，就話呢我跌落去嗰陣呢係唔知道㗎喎。內文睇到啦，咁啊姜濤呢日前嘅晏晝墮海，獲救嘅時間清醒㗎，並送院治理。咁啊，尋日呢6月25號，姜濤已經出院。如常出席歌迷活動，尋晚更加呢係完成活動後呢，即刻飛往巴黎啊！咁啊，姜濤尋晚喺機場外邊見記者，簡單交代身體情況，就話呢身體狀況冇事㗎，醫生 check 過，一切安好啊，唔使擔心。至於事發經過，佢表示啊，自己跑步嘅時間想坐喺海邊睇下個夕陽啦，咁啊做咗個唔好嘅示範啦，跨咗欄杆出去㗎，但我起身諗住落返去。就有少少暈啦，然後就跌咗落去啦，所以都係好意外嘅嘢。佢否認自己有情緒問題㗎，但承認有食藥，就話呢係有食少少嘅止痛藥㗎，因為個頭好痛啊。咁啊，記者問到佢有冇飲酒啊，佢就有少少，但係呢就並非借酒消愁啊，就話啦，我跌落去嗰下我都唔知㗎，係落咗水先啊，哇咩事咁樣喎？佢亦都承認啦係有嚇親父母㗎，就話有啊，好快翻到去呢，就同佢哋解釋翻咁話喎。咁啊，至於日前墮海，咁啊，尋日就已經極速復工，佢屬於自己嘅意願啦，就話呢。